Hello, everybody. Now I will share my screen. And let me know if you can see this.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So today we will discuss ChatGPT, overcoming routine tasks with the help of artificial intelligence. So first I will describe a task that I solved using with help of ChatGPT. Then we'll describe the process of solving such task and then make some conclusions for that. And first, let me introduce myself. My name is Iaroslav, and I entered the IT industry relatively recently, already having significant experience in the field of filmmaking. In the photo taken that period of time, you can see me with a large movie camera in my hands. Initially, when I was considering a career change to IT, I identified two directions that seemed most attractive to me. It was software development for Android mobile devices, as I have always loved mobile gadgets, or testing, as I have always enjoyed exploring and understanding how different software works. First, I began self-studying and tried my hand at developing mobile application using Java programming language. Then I tried my hand at functional testing. It was quite fascinating, but I felt that something was still missing. Finally, I learned that EPAM offers courses on becoming a software test automation engineer and realized that this was the exact profession I needed. Successfully completing the 6-month course, I received a job offer from a company and eventually landed on a project for automated testing of a mobile application, where I currently work. It turns out that it was on the project that I found everything I love and about IT and to which I'm inclined. It's development, testing, and mobile applications. I'm not an expert on ChatGPT and have only recently encountered this tool, but I want to share my experience of interacting with it. Some of my conclusions may seem too obvious to those who have been using ChatGPT for a long time, but my report is primarily aimed at those who haven't yet had the chance to try it and are still considering how to use ChatGPT in their work to solve everyday and primarily routine tasks. All of the conclusions I have drawn during my interaction with ChatGPT are purely subjective. This is only my personal opinion, which, however, I would like to share with you. As I mentioned earlier, I work on a project for automating the testing of a native mobile application. In the course of my work, the following task arose. In one of the application sections, there is a list of article cards. It was necessary to check and ensure that these cards in the list were sorted by the time of publication of the articles. Here on the screenshots, you can see such timestamps on the article cards that should be verified. At first glance, this seems like a relatively trivial task, but it was complicated by the fact that publication time of the articles was represented not in the standard datetime format, but in human-readable strings. It also didn't specify an absolute moment date time of publication, but rather a time interval in the past when the article was published. The first and the most logical idea was to gather all the timestamps from the article cards into a list and then write a comparator that would compare elements of this list and ultimately tell us whether such a list is sorted or not. With this request, I turned to ChatGPT. Please write a comparator in the Java programming language that would allow you to compare dates and times presented in human readable text form. As we can see, ChatGPT generated code for such a comparator quite quickly. It indeed takes two strings variables representing some datetime records as input. But the key to this solution is the parse method that takes a string containing a date time in standard notation and returns a date already in the standard Java format that can be further compared. And since the time in my case doesn't correspond to the standard notation, such a comparator cannot be used. Therefore, in the next request, to correctly parse strings containing date time, I had to clarify how exactly they can look like. Please write a parser in the Java programming language that would allow you to convert dates and times presented in human readable text form, such as, for example, today, 1 hour ago, a week ago, and etc., into a standard datetime format. This time, I got a solution that was more similar to what I needed. I won't bore you with a detailed breakdown of this code, but despite the fact that it was much closer to the solution that could be used for my task, I had one significant drawback. After a detailed analysis of the solution, I discovered that it was too general, basically taking into account possible formulations of time intervals, including those that are not found in the application on article cards. I also noticed that this happened because ChatGPT followed the formulation set out in the request quite accurately. And this is quite logical since the machine cannot deduce the context. Thus, the phrase etc. in my request was clearly unnecessary. Then I conducted an investigation into all the time recording patterns that can occur in the application. After which I reformulated the question as follows, explicitly specifying all such patterns. As you can see, I tried to take into account all possible patterns, including the wording of singular and plural and even variants that indicate the same time interval, but formulated differently. For example, a minute ago or 1 minute ago, and so on. After brief consideration, ChatGPT responds with the following: a date time parser class. The solution itself is quite extensive, so I won't provide the full code here. However, as you can see on the slide, the parser method is based on regular expressions. Here you can see some patterns for regular expressions. And I wonder how many of the audience frequently use regular expressions in their work and can operate them without consulting manuals or references. Could you please answer in the chat, other such people among you? Let's please vote. For example, let's put 1 if you can and 0 if you cannot. 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. Yeah, I'm glad to see that somebody can. But 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay, let me vote as well. I will put 0 because definitely I'm not one of them. Nonetheless, using regexp seems to be the optimal solution for this task. If I had worked on it independently, it would have taken me much longer to implement such a solution or something similar. Later, this method, almost in this form, became the foundation or a key method of my class library for working with strings representing human readable date time. It seems like the task was almost complete, but that's not the end of the story. I will skip a few steps of our correspondence were pretty straightforward and focused on methods for transforming a collection of elements into another format in a loop and etc. Since these methods were so simple, I was too lazy to write them myself and entrusted the work to an artificial intelligence assistant. I should also clarify during our conversation, I asked him, and by the way, I have one more question for the audience. Whether you should use personal pronouns such as he, she, or refer to it as an inanimate object. Use word it or any other options maybe when talking about artificial intelligence. Would you please write your opinion to the chat? Okay, I already see one. It. I use him. I feel they are human. But most people think that it's by name, it. But I agree with that person who wrote he. Yeah, that's interesting because this might not be quite grammatically correct. But when I talk to ChatGPT, in my imagination, I imagine a living, animated interlocutor. So I prefer to use the word he. So I asked ChatGPT, or I asked him, even they, okay, if it would be better to use English for requests, or if I can use any other language. The response was that it doesn't matter. Therefore, I switched to my native language, which is Russian, and some following screenshots will also be in Russian, but sure, I will explain them. And so I reached the point where I had to check whether my collection of datetime elements was sorted. I wondered how could I do this and received the following response. To check if a list zoned datetime is sorted, you can use the method collections.isSorted. This method takes a list and a comparator as arguments and returns true if the list is sorted according to the specified comparator and false otherwise. The answer seems quite logical and convincing. At the first, I didn't suspect anything and honestly tried to use this sorting method. But to my surprise, I couldn't find the isSorted method inside the standard collections class, no matter how hard I looked. I asked ChatGPT to explain why this could be the case. I couldn't find the isSorted method in the collections class. Maybe this method is located in some other class or package, to which I got an answer. Sorry for the confusion, I made a mistake. In fact, there is no standard isSorted method in the collections class in Java. This answer was a complete surprise to me, as I couldn't imagine that an artificial intelligence could make such a glaring mistake as pointing to a non-existent method in a class. Only after admitting their mistake, the required method for checking whether a collection of any elements is sorted was generated. For this method, I had to use clarification request again to get a method that doesn't take into account the sorting order, whether ascending or descending, and is a bit more specific, only for datetime values. Please write a Java programming language method is zone date time sorted that will check whether a collection is sorted regardless or whether it is ascending or descending order. And only then the correct method was created. Later on, I encountered situations where ChatGPT made quite significant errors. Here is one example from my experience, but for a different task. I needed to check and confirm that the color of some text fragments in a native mobile applications was different from black. This text is highlighted with the orange color, for example. For this purpose, I asked if it was possible to access CSS data for text elements using Appium, specifying that this was for native mobile application. This is important. ChatGPT responds that it was possible, but in practice, this approach didn't work. And further investigation and reading of the Appium documentation showed that this solution was only applicable to web mobile applications and definitely didn't work for native mobile applications. So once again, there was a situation where the solution proposed by ChatGPT seems logical and convincing at first glance, but in reality, it was not. Returning to our task about date time, eventually, the solution was ready and presented to colleagues in the form of class library with corresponding methods. They reviewed and kindly approved it. All of this work with the help of artificial intelligence took me 3 days. Whereas, without artificial intelligence, I estimated that it would have taken me approximately a month, or even maybe more. However, later, this library underwent several minor revisions and refactoring to better meet the project's requirements. These were the small nuances of the method's work that ChatGPT could not have known, and that became apparent later during the library's usage. And let's go to conclusions. ChatGPT is wonderful, convenient, and quite fast tool for solving many everyday tasks, primarily routine ones that would otherwise take us a long time and effort, or conversely to be easy and boring. Therefore, if the task is long and difficult, we delegate its solution to ChatGPT. If the task is too easy and boring, we also delegate its solution to ChatGPT. It's convenient to move toward the final solution that will satisfy you with the small iterations, analyzing the answer repeatedly and clarifying your request. Perhaps this is a skill that comes with a frequent practice. Accurate formulation of tasks is necessary because in the combination AI, the keyword is still the word artificial. ChatGPT cannot guess and speculate that you might mean. Therefore, to reduce the number of request iterations, the accuracy of formulations looks very useful. And I think it's also a trainable skill, so please train a lot. ChatGPT still is not a substitute for a human. The code written by it or by him needs to be controlled and checked, understanding how it works. The need for fine-tuning, the ability to change and adapt it to solve your work tasks. And then, actually, it's not a conclusion, but kind of advice. It's necessary to exercise caution with the information you share with ChatGPT. Do not provide any sensitive data for the company or project or a customer. Depersonalize them and formulate tasks more generally. I hope that my experience will help those who have not yet started working with ChatGPT to begin, and those who have already started to do this more efficiently. Thank you for your attention, and how it's fashionable to say now, this report also was prepared and translated from Russian into English with the help of ChatGPT. And now, maybe your questions, please.
Okay, thank you, Iaroslav. So guys, please write down your questions in chat. And before you think on questions and probably typing them into chat, let me ask Iaroslav you for a few questions from my side. So as far as I understood you, in common, your experience with ChatGPT was beneficial. Is that correct?
Yes, it is
okay.
correct.
So does that mean that you just using ChatGPT just technically means that you save your time? If yes, can you approximately, of course, evaluate how much time would it save if you start to use it on a regular basis?
Oh, it's definitely like that. Yes, ChatGPT saved lots of time for me. And for example, for this task, as I mentioned earlier, it took me about 3 days. But if I wouldn't use this help of artificial intelligence, it probably take me a month or something about that. A month. So
wow,
it's a huge amount of time. I would say it helped a lot.
Okay. Thanks for that estimate. So questions from Maya. What are your future plans in using ChatGPT?
My future plans still use it and get better and better to have that experience and training to make better requests for that.
Okay.
And so on, yeah.
So you will continue. That's nice to hear. So I would expect some maybe more reports from you in the next future. Okay, guys, any other questions? Maybe. Yeah. So the questions from Alexei. Do you have experience in using ChatGPT version 4? So by the way, what version have you used?
In this example, I used already, I can say, old version, which is 3.5. And I have not yet experienced to get familiar with the modern version, which is 4. But I'm looking toward that, and I hope in the nearest future I will be able also test this version.
Okay. Question from Ekaterina. What do you think about prohibiting it? I mean, I suppose ChatGPT in some countries.
Oh, I'm happy that in a country where yeah, but what do I think? In that country where I'm located right now, it's not prohibited. So I'm glad about that I can use this. But what can I say about other countries? It's a difficult question. It's probably kind of political and
well,
I can only say that I'm glad that I can use it. It's not prohibited in my country.
Okay, so I can add to this that if you are in prohibited country, so you can use probably a VPN to get an access, and as far as I know, it works. Okay, so lots of questions was typed. Question from Dmitro. Did you have an experience in code refactoring with help of ChatGPT?
Yes, it's almost the same experience, and as inventing new code and refactoring, ChatGPT is doing this as well. Yeah, and it can help you a lot.
How do you do that? So you just type your code into ChatGPT and ask it to just please refactor it.
Yes, definitely like that. But once again, please be careful with those code that you provide to ChatGPT, that it will not contain any sensitive data. Or so try to be a little bit more general.
Okay. A question from Tuan. It probably already answered. How can I access to ChatGPT? It seems it cannot be accessed from my country. Do I need to use VPN or something like that? So answer, Tuan, answer is yes.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Try to install even free VPN, so it doesn't require lots of traffic to use. So it's possible. A question from Raj Kiran. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Is it safe to send out code for refactoring? It might give out your client code. I suppose that it was also answering. So answer it. So the question, it is not safe. So better to send some general code on that. Questions from Roman. Thank you. Could you please tell the final number of lines of code that solved your mentioned task?
Oh, I'm afraid I cannot provide the exact number of lines of code.
Well, and it's hundreds, thousands, dozens.
I wouldn't say it saved me some lines of code or some amount of code. It's probably saved mostly time for inventing those lines, those code. But it saves time, but sometimes when you want to make it less, the number of code, you can ask to refactor, and that, yes, it will. But I didn't do this for this task. I already got so-called optimized code from ChatGPT, so I didn't use the refactoring for that. Maybe later by myself, yes, to adopt this solution for my project needs.
Okay. Thank you, Iaroslav. Guys, we have some questions left in chat, but we have to move forward since we are limited in time. So I suppose the rest of the questions will be answered by Iaroslav during the next presentation. So let's move forward.